everyone, my name is Margaret Schultz, and I'm the Archives Assistant at BHEC. I'm here today with our first ever installment of Snapshot, a glimpse into the BHEC archives. Today I'm going to tell you about two artifacts from our collections, which together tell us a story about survival, and remind us that sometimes survival can be entirely up to chance. These artifacts are two pairs of scissors, one which came to the US from Poland around 1907, and the other which was found at Auschwitz, a Polish concentration camp. Before I get too far into these two stories, however, I want to tell you a little bit about the history of scissors and explain why they're important. Ever since they were invented over 2,000 years ago, scissors have been an important part of everyday life. But because they were made entirely by hand, they were expensive. Even when mass production of scissors was introduced in the late 1800s, they still had to be put together by skilled craftsmen and remained expensive until plastic scissors were introduced. Even today, scissors made like these cost over $100. Because they were so expensive, most households kept only one pair of scissors, and they were considered prized possessions. When people immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s, they brought with them their most valuable possessions, which included things like family photographs, books, and silverware. Polish-Jewish immigrant Rebecca Rubin brought this pair of scissors with her to the U.S. when she immigrated around 1907. Rebecca was one of the 1.5 million Jewish immigrants to come to the U.S. from Eastern Europe between 1900 and 1914. Many of these immigrants were fleeing increasing religious persecution in Eastern Europe. Like most of her fellow immigrants, Rebecca entered the U.S. through Ellis Island in New York. Not long after arriving in New York, Rebecca married fellow Polish-Jewish immigrant Morris Rogoff in 1908. The couple had two children while living in New York, named Sarah and Louis. Between 1920 and 1930, the Rogoffs moved to Altoona, a small town in Etowah County, Alabama, where they operated a department store. In 1933, the Rogoffs' daughter Sarah married Birmingham furniture salesman Max Sokol. By 1940, the Rogoffs had moved to Birmingham, likely to be closer to Sarah. Morris died in 1948 at the age of 59, and Rebecca continued living in Birmingham until her death in 1979 at the age of 92. After she died, Rebecca passed her scissors down to her grandson, Jim Sokol, who kept them for many years as a family heirloom until donating them to the BHEC in 2018. At the same time, Jim also donated this pair of scissors, which he had found at Auschwitz, a concentration camp in Poland. In 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, sparking World War II. In 1940, the Nazis built Auschwitz I as a labor and extermination camp in southern Poland. In 1942, the Nazis opened Auschwitz II, also known as Birkenau, to expand the camp complex. When people were deported to Auschwitz, they frequently did not know where they were being sent, and would pack bags full of their most prized possessions, much in the same way that Rebecca and her family did when they immigrated to the U.S. When people arrived at the Auschwitz complex, their belongings were immediately taken from them. They were then sorted into groups. Some were selected for forced labor, while the majority were sent directly to the gas chambers, located in Birkenau. It is estimated that 1.3 million people, mostly Jews, were sent to Auschwitz, and that 1.1 million of them were murdered in the gas chambers. Prisoners' belongings were taken to Birkenau's Canada warehouses, which were named after the country Canada because it was associated with wealth. At the warehouses, belongings were sorted before being sent back to Germany to be sold. When the Soviet Army closed in on the Auschwitz complex in January 1945, the Nazis attempted to cover up their crimes by setting fire to the Canada warehouses and blowing up the nearby gas chambers. Despite these efforts, however, many artifacts survived the fires. Much of what survived was made entirely of metal, like these scissors. We can see that these scissors survived the fires because the blades are melted together, and there appear to be eyeglass frames melted into the handles. After the Auschwitz complex was liberated, Soviet-controlled Poland immediately took steps to preserve Auschwitz I, but their efforts did not extend to Birkenau. Most of Birkenau did not survive the Nazi destruction, and of the wooden barracks that did survive, most were taken apart and moved to supply desperately needed housing in the post-war era. As a result, Birkenau has been in ruins ever since Auschwitz was turned into a museum in 1947. According to Jim Sokol, he found these scissors in a large mound of rusting metal artifacts while on a visit to the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum in the 1980s with a group from the United Jewish Appeal. He said that when he found these scissors, his tour guide, a Holocaust survivor, told him he could take the scissors home. When Jim found these scissors, he was struck by their similarity to his grandmother's. They reminded him that she was lucky to escape Poland. Instead of packing her bags to come to America, Rebecca could have packed her bags to come to Auschwitz. Had she not come to America when she did, these could have been Rebecca's scissors.